Hello, this is Tiffany Spring with Bay News 1, and today we're bringing you our lead story from Flamingo Bay, the little city with the big pink birds. Today we've invited the mayor, Madam Mayor Shirley Krutz. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule to talk to us about what's going on in Flamingo Bay. Now, a year ago, there was great rejoicing when the Santa Lines trolley opened its first run. But today we hear that citizens are up in arms about the trolley. What's the new news now?
Well, they are up in arms because there's no protection around the trolley, and we have to protect the kids. It's just open fare. They can go right under it. So we must have some protection going around there.
Sir, are you a resident of Flamingo Bay? And if so, have you an opinion about the trolley barn?
Oh, yes, I'm a resident and I have an opinion. We don't need no protection because that's my shortcut. I go over there to get over there to the bathroom.
Thank you. And at that, we'll tell you more about the new news now from the studio. That's it from Tiffany Spring.
So there I was, sitting in the workshop, left hand wrapped around a chocolate chip cookie. Right hand, thumb and forefinger stuck together with super glue as usual, watching the news. This report comes on from Flamingo Bay. What more troubles do I need? It's after Christmas. It's supposed to be my time off. The next morning, the lawyer calls. The lawyer says the folks from Flamingo Bay want a fence put around the trolley barn. A fence put around the trolley barn. I don't know how to make a fence. Let's make a fence. I suppose there are kits to make chain link fence, but I kind of like to do things on my own, invent things. Often they're less expensive and sometimes easier than kits. And sometimes I find later that someone did it first and better, but I still answered the challenge to myself. This is just one way to make chain link fence. It's just my way. If it works for you, that's great. So I tried a few things first with paperclip wire and solder, and they didn't work. Then I tried super glue gel and paperclip wire, and that worked pretty well, but the wire looked too big. So off I went to Hobby Lobby, and I found 20/100ths music wire, or piano wire. And then, wandering down the jewelry aisle, I found something called jewelry and metal glue. Now, I've also discovered that regular super glue in the gel pack actually works pretty good too, but I think there's a little something extra in the jewelry and metal glue that makes it do just a little bit better. After that shopping, my wife took me to the fabric section and we looked at nylon net for fence material. It definitely looked way too large for HO scale, so she suggested tulle. Tulle is often used for decoration or veils. I bought a yard of tulle in gray for about $1.25, enough to make fence for Flamingo Bay and a whole lot of other places. And this then is what my first attempt looked like. Not bad, but far from good. There are large extra globs of glue, and since that time, I've refined the process. Here's what we're going to use to build our fence. We'll need some wax paper, foam board, white glue, a Sharpie, tweezers, hobby knife, masking tape, some toothpicks, a couple of rulers, and a small bolt cutter. Music wire is hard to cut. The people at Flamingo Bay didn't want a decorative fence. They wanted one that would keep people from going under the trolley barn. So it needed to be 6 feet tall at least. Just for a starting space, I measured a ½ an inch from the bottom of my foam board and drew a line. Then using my HO scale ruler, I measured 6 feet from my first line and drew another. Next, I drew lines a scale 4 foot apart along those horizontal lines that I had done first. That's the pattern. The first time I cut piano wire with my bolt cutter, I spent the next ½ hour finding little tiny pieces of wire all over the room. Here's my solution. Bundle the music wire together and wrap it with some masking tape. Then when you do your measurement, use a Sharpie to mark on the masking tape. Then when you cut it, the pieces will stay together and not fly around the room. You cut the vertical wires, the uprights, the same way. They need to be a little longer than the scale 6 foot of the fence. I made mine about 9 scale feet long. I discovered I could cut 6 pieces of wire at a time and use the same method of covering the bundle of wire with masking tape and marking the lengths. After I cut the horizontal wires, which I call runners, I used masking tape to attach them to the wax paper covered foam core. You want to attach not only at both ends, like this, over the pattern, but also in the center, so that your horizontal member stays straight and as close to the wax paper as you can get it. You repeat with the other one, and you're ready for the next step. I mentioned when I showed you my first attempt that there were large globs of super glue. By my third attempt, I had kind of refined the process. I put a couple of short pieces of masking tape on my work surface and then put my glue on it. Then I used the vertical fence wire, one of these, the little short ones that I made so many of, as the glue applicator. Here's how it works. I dip one end of the upright in the super glue. It gets a little dab on the end. I touch that end to the bottom runner, and then after I'm sure there's a little bit deposited there, I take the top of that upright and put it to the top rail. This is when you can take your hobby knife and touch down in the center to make sure you have good contact. This one looks just a little crooked. There, that's better. So that's how it works. And then what you do is you do another one. Generally, I do several uprights and then go away and let it dry for a while. But it's the same process of putting a little super glue on the bottom, touching the upright to the horizontal, making sure that it's straight and attached on both ends. It's a bit of a fiddly process, but it doesn't take too awful long to make a good long section of fence. Then when you're finished with the uprights, you test them all to make sure that their ends are securely attached to both runners. If you have some that aren't, take another piece of your upright wire and put some super glue on it and just touch at the junction where they're not completely fastened down. That should take care of it. The tool is very lightweight and flimsy. However, since it's not a woven material, if it does get out of shape, it'll go back to its original shape. So how to cut it in a rectangular piece long enough for a fence? I discovered 3/4 inch masking tape is very close to the 6 foot measured distance of the fence. So I cut off a small rectangular piece of tool so I wouldn't have the whole yard to mess with, and getting as close to a square edge as I could, I carefully put masking tape along the edge of the tool. Now you can trim with your scissors along the edge of the masking tape and have the tool be the proper height. If you were actually making a shorter fence, you could take your HO scale, measure up your 4 feet or whatever you wanted to, make a mark on the masking tape, and then cut it so it would be the proper width. When you're ready to use it, pull the tool off the masking tape. It'll look like it's stretching and distorting. Don't worry, it'll go back to its original size and shape. Now is when the white glue comes into play. I removed the fence from the waxed paper, and using a toothpick, I put some white glue on several of the uprights, smoothing it out with a toothpick. They're going to take the brunt of the load, but you can also put some in between. You don't need a lot, just enough to catch it. And then taking the tool, I put it down on the fence. Okay, that's there. And I suppose the smart thing to do would be to use something like a paint jar to hold it down with to keep it in place. Now, for me, it's time for a chocolate chip cookie. After this dries a little bit, I'll come back and do the rest so that it's not too messy to work with. It just seems to work better that way. So now it's time to install our chain link fence. And as you can see, there's a lot of extra wires along the bottom. You don't need all of those. Well, the bolt cutter doesn't cut square or flush with the bottom of the fence. So I went online and I found this tool, Cruise Tools. What it is a string cutter for guitars. It's hardened steel and it cuts through the individual lines or uprights on the bottom of the fence, just like a hot knife through butter. So now we're ready to install the fence because the uprights have been trimmed off, leaving several inappropriate positions. Now, this end of my layout, which is made of foam, has an additional piece of 1/4-inch foam on it to give a little elevation. So getting a hole through that foam core is going to be a little difficult. So what I'm going to do is to take a white paint marker and mark the ends of the fence posts. The reason I can use the white marker is that I know when I'm finished and I have the fence in the ground, I can put a little ground foam around it or some weeds or bushes to cover up the white paint. Now, all I'm going to do is use my simple little tool here that I stole from my dentist when she was cleaning my teeth and punch holes in the ground through the white so that the fence will line up and so I can see the holes after I've finished punching them. Well, I went to Plan B. Plan B, I think, will work better than Plan A. I'm taking T-pins and putting them through the foam and leaving them in place so that I can find them later on to put the wires from the fence into. The fence is in 4 holes in the ground. I ended up making the holes larger so that I would have a little wiggle room. And now I'm going to take some white glue and put just a little drop on each post at its hole so that it can be secured. Then the last thing to do is to push the fence down in the hole, making sure that it's on the ground. It's not there, it's sprung a little bit, so we'll just use our friend the T-pin and gently hold it down. So there you go. We'll kind of let that glue dry, then we'll put some bushes and weeds along the bottom of it, and we should have a party. Time has passed. The fence is finished. A chain link fence, just what the good folks of Flamingo Bay wanted. It was a learning experience. I hope you enjoyed learning about how to make chain link fence with me on Santa's Workshop.